the executive summary. This executive summary or the abstract, I'm going to talk about some of the other things with respect to the executive summary. It should be qualitative. Now, why are we calling it qualitative? We are like aware of the difference between what is qualitative and quantitative, because in the quantitative data, it's based on numbers, fractions, percentages. This is not something required when it comes to your executive summary or the abstract. You need to keep yourself focused on the quality of the data by avoiding the numerical figures. Just focus on the text. Your basic abstract should tell you why this thing has been written, what is the basic outcome, and what are your basic recommendations. And that would make a good abstract. As I have written over here, purpose and outcome with results are expected, and that is going to make it qualitative. One thing to avoid while preparing your abstract is the use of abbreviations, because the executive summary basically comes at the beginning. Without providing the details of those abbreviations, if you are using those acronyms, that is going to create confusion within the mind of the reader, because the moment he or she reads that abbreviation, he shall get confused, and that is not something that you want to happen at the very outset. That will automatically create a negative impression within the mind of your reader. So the best way would be to avoid the use of abbreviations. This is basically the next part or the component of the overall structure of a report. The table of contents. You have seen it in the very initial pages of so many books, also known as TOC. The table of content basically is a combination of section, subsection, and appendices. You basically provide, by the use of this table of contents, the overall scope of writing that report, then the overall organization of that report, then providing the details of each and every section and the page number in which you can find the details with respect to that section. And then you can also look towards the use of decimal figures, like numbers. You find so many numbers, 1.1, 1.1.1. These are the different degrees of heading that you find within the use of this table of contents. But right now, not going into that much detail, as we have to discuss them afterwards. So it's time to move ahead towards the next section. Introduction. Very much important, as it is going to simply set a background of why you are writing the whole report. And these are the essential components or the features, the points that you need to keep in mind while preparing the introduction. First thing at the top is that your introduction should describe the problem which has been assigned to you. As I mentioned, keeping in view the context, you are given a problem, you need to set your objectives, your goals, carry out research, get results, conclude your study with some suggestions and recommendations. So the whole process begins by the description of the problem. Moving onwards, you move towards the objectives. Based on the description of the problem, you're setting your objectives. Within the same introduction, you will talk about the methodology which is assigned or which will be used to gain the results based on the objectives. Then you give a light anticipation or the expectation of the most interesting results which would be achieved by carrying out that study. And overall, while preparing this introduction, you need to focus on brevity. And by brevity, I mean to keep things concise. Talking about conciseness. So if it's brief, to the point and focused, it will be a good introduction. This is basically the next section, which comes after the preparation of your introduction. You talk about the design and procedure, and by design you talk about the overall method that you're going to take to work on those objectives, to gain some results for those objectives and the goals that you have set. So the first thing, when you talk about the design and procedure, you need to provide a theoretical description. Like for a person, for a layman who really wants to know what a report has been written about, so of course if he wants to see the methodology, he wants to go into the details as well. So if that theoretical description is there, he or she will get the answer he's looking for. But if it's missing, he'll say, okay, I don't know what is this model about, let's move onwards, but I'm not clear about it. So that will create a negative impact. But if you have provided the theoretical description, you'll know, okay, fine, that is how this methodology has been placed, and that is how he has carried out the experiment, and that is the way he has achieved those results, because he or she is clear about the theoretical description or the framework. Then you can talk about the testing of the proposed design as well, that how this design which has been proposed will be tested. Not just talking about the theoretical description, that not just talking about the basic theory, but how it will be applied as well to achieve those objectives and to find the results. So we need to talk about the testing procedure as well. But this is basically the point in which you don't need to go into the specific measurements, because right now the process hasn't started yet. You're just giving a picture of how the process will be used to achieve those results. So no specific measurements. Basically, be brief and get to the point. So that is how you structure your design and procedure. This is basically the point where something is expected from you. And this is the time when you need to go into the textual explanation. It is the time when you have to elaborate all the findings that you have gained and you have achieved. And you can use it by interpreting all the figures, the tables, the charts, and diagrams. So over here, this is the point where you have the access of providing the explanation. But keep them separate from the sections which appeared earlier. But I told you very clearly that you need to use brevity. Not here. You require the details. Now coming towards the conclusion, this is basically the time when you have to sum up all the points that you have provided in detail within the previous sections. This is the point in which many eyes are there. Because, for example, if we talk about the managerial readers, we're of course looking at the executive summary, but if they want to go into the details of what were the basic findings and what were the basic results, so they will be looking for the quantitative data as well. So this is the point where you have the access, where you have the time and space of quantitatively summing up all the results with brevity. Of course with brevity, because this is the point where you are concluding everything. It's not the point where you need to go into the details. No, it's the conclusion. So no use of abbreviations once again, because you'll be wondering why. Why are we being told to avoid the use of abbreviation? The reason being that there are many readers who do not go into the basic body of the report. All they worry about is the introduction and what's the conclusion. If you are using abbreviations and they haven't gone into the basic body where you have provided the details of the abbreviations, they won't know what these abbreviations are about. So use proper wording so that if someone is not reading the body, would still know what that thing stands for. Avoid the use of abbreviation. Do highlight the problem. Do give a touch to your objectives. How was the procedure carried out and how you achieve your results. That is how you structure a good conclusion. And this is a point which is directly related to all the citations of relevant authors, credible authors who have worked in your field, who have covered that area. This is the time in which you can place their details in the form of AP or MLA format, which is basically the approved format for preparing your report. Depends on which format is being used for drafting and preparing your report. An appendix, where relevant, you have to provide so that it may provide all the necessary information which is expected from you to provide to your target audience. Moving ahead, we talked about it earlier, but once again I'm giving you a light overview of the nature of the readers that you need to keep in mind while preparing your report. This is something expected when the technical readers are basically perusing and checking your report. Their focus would be on the figures. They won't be reading your text. They would know how to interpret the information by simply looking at the figure. The managerial or the executive body will simply look towards the summary. They'll know what is it about. If it's really worth reading, if it's related to their field, if it's going to provide the advantage, okay, let's read it. So their focus would be on the executive summary. So if you know that the target audience is the second one, pay full attention and focus on drafting a perfect exec summary so that it may not have any error at all, creating confusion within the mind of your addressee. Talking about the general readers, if you think they are the ones who will receive the information, you need to go into the details of providing relevant information in a good way, in an effectively communicating manner, so that they will understand all the points which you have written for them in a comprehensible language. Some important points to consider when we talk about clarity within your content. You are writing a report and it is expected from you to be clear within your points. That is basically done by the use of active verbs, by clearly highlighting what sorts of tasks were performed, how were they performed, and how were the results gained, and how did you come up to that conclusion which you have achieved. So these should be by the use of active verbs, because active verbs are going to reflect your performance and your active engagement within the whole process. Brevity could be achieved by the use of declarative, simple sentences, not going into the different forms of complex sentences, which would of course create confusion. Keep your language simple. The simplicity of language is going to win you success. That simplicity is going to create clarity within your text as well. Now talking about the objectivity, as I mentioned earlier, no use of first person, singular or plural, because once again, what would they do? We talked about it, as I mentioned. Yes, they are going to create subjectivity, and that is something which is required to be avoided while preparing your report. Keeping it in third person.